Before we get started, we have a few items to review. This project is funded under OJJDP under this award number shown here. Additionally, the opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed are those of the authors and don't necessarily reflect the Department of Justice. Moving into who we are the Tribal Youth Resource Center, a program of Tribal Law and Policy Institute. We envision a future where Indigenous youth thrive through traditional ways of life, enhancing the opportunities for Indigenous communities to expand their potential in protecting and nurturing their most sacred asset, the youth. At TLPI, we are dedicated to providing free publication resources, comprehensive training, and technical assistance for Native nations and tribal justice systems in pursuit of our vision to empower the Native communities to create and control their own institutions for the benefit of all community members now and for future generations. You could also find these different programs shown on the screen here and learn more about them by visiting home.tlpi.org. It is now my great honor to introduce both Miss Erin Thinalk and Judge Pat Sekaquaptewa being our presenters today. So Miss Erin, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. Natakiapi, Chante Washtinape, Chilapi, Erin Thinalk Machiapi. That's my English name. I'm Sichanga Lakota. Wanakcha Tukahe Hinapiawi. First flower that blooms woman is my Lakota name. And I am an MSW and social worker, and I serve as a juvenile healing to wellness court training and technical assistance specialist for the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And I am going to be one of the presenters today. Really happy that you guys are all here and look forward to having some discussion with you on case management. And Pat, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pat Sekaquaptewa. I never remember to share my Hopi name, which is Palakwaimana. And my father is from Eagle Clan from Old Aribe. I am also heading up the training and technical assistance with the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And I'm popping in today to Erin's online learning event on case management to talk a little bit about juvenile probation. So thank you for having me.
Okay, so today during our time, we're going to compare and contrast case management approaches from older tribal juvenile court probation approaches to juvenile drug court probation approaches and looking at contemporary juvenile healing to wellness court approaches and highlighting contemporary reforms and innovations. We're also going to look and explore how case management is implicit to each of the key components of the tribal healing to wellness courts. We're going to learn about wraparound case management, which is one of my favorite approaches to case management in juvenile healing to wellness courts. And we are very lucky because I'm going to introduce a very special guest, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his case management perspective with his Tribal Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. So that will come a little bit later at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So I think we're going to go with our first poll questions, and I'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
Wonderful, thank you. Sorry about that. It takes me a second to unmute and turn my video on. So we'd just like to gauge, what you know and what your current rules are. So using the chat or the polling once it gets pulled up here, we'd just like to know what your current role is. Are you a case management manager, case coordinator, a judge, a cultural advisor, court clerk, probation officer, behavioral health specialist, therapist, social worker, tribal administrator, or other? And I'm also curious, if you are a case manager, has your title changed or do you use a different title? So go ahead and use the chat. And it looks like the chat function will be best here so I can see them all. Probation officer, wonderful. Thanks for being here. Clerk of the court, coordinator, program coordinator, other? I would like to know other. Probation officer, judge, wonderful. And if you are other, can you describe or if you have a different title? I would love to know. Strategic planning manager,
Hmm.
tribal youth planner.
Mhm. Thank you guys. This is so helpful. We asked this because we want to know who we have joining us today. That helps us to individualize this presentation a little bit better to who we have joining us.
Mental health care coordinator, juvenile probation officer, and also the skill level right across. And this is a collective environment where we get to share and learn from one another. And it's
Mhm.
also just what a great honor to be among just very intelligent people serving young people and what I get to learn from you. So thank you for being here, juvenile probation officer. Wonderful. All right, Erin, go ahead and take it away. It looks like we have most of everybody mention their title in or their role in the chat.
And it looks like we have one person who actually has the title of case manager. Interesting.
Looks like
Okay,
you're
let's go to the next slide. All right, so one last question before we move on is, are you currently supporting case management in your juvenile healing to wellness court? So yes, no, or unsure. And Ashley, do we just ask them to put it in the...
Yes, go ahead and use the chat. With polling, we don't necessarily see, like using Zoom poll, we don't responses. And so using the chat function, we get to see all the responses. So yes, currently supporting case management. No, not yet. Seating process. Yes, it is a process. Eva, thank you for being here. So great to see you. Yes. Oh, thank you, Janae. She's going to be taking this information back to their case manager who couldn't be there today. No, not currently supporting case management. Unsure. Yes. So there's a good mix right now. Not yet. No. Unsure. And for those who have said yes, as we delve into this presentation, feel free to explain more of what you do. And for those who say unsure or not yet, we might be able to help guide them through case management. Yes, unsure. Great. Wonderful. And I believe we have one more polling question. Oh, no, that was it
We're
so
done.
we had
Yeah.
two to start off and go ahead, Erin.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for engaging in those questions. That's very helpful. All right, so here we are today, joining together and having that discussion and exploring what case management is. So case management really can mean a lot of different things. It can take on many different approaches, different roles, depending on the profession or discipline that you are working in. So, example, if you work in social work, case management might look a little bit different. If you're in the healthcare profession, it might look a little bit different. But today, we're really looking at what it means for our youth healing to wellness courts. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So serving as our framework for youth healing to wellness courts, we're going to start with the 10 key components, which is part of our framework for building our youth healing to wellness courts. So we look at key component 5, which is talking about uh, effective case management is a team-based approach, which you're thinking, oh, wow, I was thinking we had a case manager and that's the position and that's the responsibility. True, but also key component 5 talks about how it's a team-based approach. We also have, as part of our framework in developing case management for our youth healing to wellness courts, is our drug treatment, or our juvenile drug treatment guideline 4.2, which talks about case management and that it should be individualized, culturally appropriate, and based on assessment of the youth and family needs. So we brought these to your attention because these are two of the areas and the guidelines that can be helpful and when you start thinking about case management for your youth healing to wellness court. So this can be serve as the guidelines for building your case management approach. Okay, so next slide. So this, the information from this was taken from our Tribal Youth Healing to Wellness Case Management Handbook. And for those of you that have had the chance to log into our brand new portal, which hopefully all of you have had that chance to do, we have the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Case Management Handbook, and this information is taken from there. So this is another step towards helping you develop, what is case management going to look like in our youth healing to wellness courts? So it's really looking at the day-to-day individual case management for that particular position, really looking at substance abuse treatment, supports for education, for housing, for maybe job employment, parenting, medical, mental health, cultural, spiritual, etc. Again, we're looking at the 10 key components for guidance and looking at support and supervision for monitoring. We also pulled from the National Drug Court Initiative to help serve as a framework for your case management for the benchmarks. And you can see that they also highlighted the importance for case managers to be a part of screening and assessment, planning, linkage to resources, support and supervision, and advocacy. So I think what's really important to note is that because substances are involved within youth healing to wellness courts, you can see that this case management approach really has integrated substance use recovery case management approaches within the youth healing to wellness. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is looking at, this is a diagram that we composed at the youth center. And I think what's important to draw your attention to is even though if there's a case manager position who will be looking at the individual case management with the youth through the random testing with alcohol and drugs, helping with the phases, working with the youth with an individualized treatment plan, helping with trauma care, helping with setting goals, with screening and assessment. There's that individual case management, working with the youth, with the families. There's also that system level case management. And this is where the team approach comes in. The team approach comes in and everyone on the team, including the judge, the coordinator, perhaps a parent's involved, perhaps there's a cultural advisor involved, the therapist, the probation officer. They all are going to be part of the case management system approach because they're working with one another to update on the progress that the youth is making and the strengths of the youth in that healing to wellness plan. Of course, also they're going to work with one another if there are some setbacks going on with the youth so that they can come together and offer the best supports to that youth and to that family. So again, there could be a case manager position. Sometimes the case coordinator takes on that position. But the whole team will be providing ongoing case management for that youth in order to be successful. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts or feedback about that, and then they want to share that in the chat.
And Erin, can you clarify your question one more time of
Yeah, sure.
so
So
you
as
were
we're looking,
asking?
yeah, sure. As we're looking at this diagram, and as I was explaining that, yes, there could be a case manager or sometimes the case coordinator. The juvenile healing to wellness case coordinator might take on the case management um, role. Case management actually is a role for the whole team. They will come together for the staffing. They'll come together perhaps if they're doing wraparound approach, and they all will report in on how the youth is being supported in the different areas. And they have to keep in communication with how that they're seeing, if perhaps if the juvenile probation officer is the one doing the random drug screening, they will report into the team and that's part of ongoing case management. If there's a therapist part of the team, they'll report in and following confidentiality, how the youth is doing in maybe the individual or group sessions, how they're improving, how, the growth that they're making. But perhaps also they'll be sharing maybe some setbacks or areas that there might be some needs. So I just wanted to see if that was maybe part of or a surprise to anyone, that the ongoing case management isn't just for the case manager. It is actually a team approach as well. So just wondering if anybody found that to be
Thank you, Erin.
surprising or had any reactions to that.
And I
And
did
that's
put that
fine
in
if
the
you don't.
chat.
Yeah. And if it's fine if you don't too, we can just move on. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so this is comparing ideas about case management.
I'm guessing you're turning it over to me, Erin.
Oh, we did have a comment
Oh, we did.
in the
Okay.
chat. So let's see. Oops. Is it Jen or Jeannie?
Janae.
Janae shared, oh gosh, I will share that something we have learned with our team is that having specific roles is important so people know what expectations are, but also being able to communicate effectively. Yep, which is so important. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I'll pass it over to you, Pat.
So I wanted to compare some different ideas about case management, and I'm coming from the court side. So I just like to say that whole diagram you just saw is the juvenile healing to wellness court docket. But remember, there's a juvenile court docket that is your regular tribal court docket in a lot of tribes. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So it's interesting to see that there's different views about what case management is, depending on whether we're talking about the old juvenile court, whether it's in the state or the tribal system, or whether we're talking about a juvenile drug court in the main state system, or whether we're talking about a juvenile healing to wellness court. And you should know that we're pulling practices from all three of those places. And so it's important to think about, are we doing something that's really old? Are we doing something that's out of date? Is this keeping up with modern reforms? And so the important questions I would ask about your tribal juvenile court probation, because that's the old model we inherited. over the years is whether you're treating putting someone on probation and putting them on probation conditions in a court order, is that being equated with case management in some way, either in your juvenile court system or in your juvenile healing to wellness court system? And then are you providing the services and resources that youth and their families need? In the old system, you just had a standard list of probation conditions, and one of them might say treatment. And they were required to do these things by court order. And if they violated the probation conditions, they might get a new charge, which just threw them back into juvenile court again. And so the question is today, are you changing the way you do things, either as a probation officer or as a case manager, so that you individualize the services you provide to them, not just the cookie cutter set of services that everyone gets, but are you actually screening and assessing them, figuring out what they need, what their families need, and then tailoring services to them? And a really good way to test this is just to look at that list of probation conditions that shows up on every court order for every youth. If it's the same across all of them, then we're stuck in the dark ages. And then, of course, assuming you want to know what they need one by one, then how do you know that? And that launches us into the whole discussion of screening and assessment. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let me go back in time a little bit and talk about the system we inherited in our tribal courts and in our tribal juvenile probation, because you kind of have to understand how things used to be to see how radical the reforms are sweeping the whole country right now with respect to how we should be doing things. So the original two goals of juvenile probation were to serve the best interest of young people. And these are young people who committed a bad act, but we're going to provide them with care and treatment and guidance so that they don't reoffend. So that was one goal. The other was to ensure the protection and safety of the public. And courts and probation divisions still do this, and this is still a requirement. It's usually a legal requirement. It's the job of the court system to make sure that we don't harm anybody by putting someone who's dangerous back out into the mix. So let me just say something about how this old probation system was set out. It's a system that is supposed to hold youth accountable with court-ordered rules or specific conditions, and they follow these conditions and rules in lieu of getting sent to jail or detention. It usually happens after an adjudication or a trial in the tribal court. And then if a young person is placed on probation and they have all these conditions, if they fail to follow them, it may result in a violation and a trip back to court, and then potentially jail or detention, depending on how old they are. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what are some of the critiques of the old way of doing things? This is taken from a law review article by Professor Nanda. It's a 2022 article, and it's called Set Up to Fail, Youth Probation Conditions as a Driver of Incarceration. So he really went back and looked at probation conditions all over the country, including in tribal courts, I think. And he said, look, the way we've been doing things is just funneling our youth into detention and prison. We're pipelining them by using the old system. He said, first of all, the probation conditions, in most places, they don't actually rehabilitate anybody, and they don't really keep communities safe. We just aren't using them that way. And that they seem to be setting up, particularly low-risk youth, setting them up to fail, because what we're doing is we're funneling in both low and medium to high risk youth into tribal court. And risk is about whether they're going to be recidivating, right? Are they going to do it again, whatever the bad act was? And we really should not be putting low risk youth in court at all. And then the third the third issue or critique is about harm. If you have so many probation conditions in that court order and they're ambiguous, they're numerous, they're overextensive, you can harm youth, especially youth who've been in the system for quite a while and who have a disproportionate exposure to trauma. Or maybe they have learning or mental health challenges. You can harm them by dumping all these conditions on them. And the conditions that are most likely to pipeline youth into detention and eventually prison are these. They're the follow the law conditions. So there's in the court order, it will say, you must obey all laws. So if they violate even one law, even a random law, it can violate them, and it looks like they're violating their probation, and they're just funneling through the system and churning in it over and over again. Be good people conditions. These are conditions that say obey rules of parents, caregivers, teachers, school officials, child protection services workers. Suddenly, there's a legal requirement to obey all these people, and if you don't, you violate a probation condition. There are we control you conditions. You must give a sample of your urine to be tested for drugs. Now, it is a requirement in wellness courts and drug courts to have random and mandatory testing. So this one is really about how you do it. It's the how of it. But in a wellness court, it's not about violating a probation condition. In a juvenile court, it is, and it can knock you back into juvenile court process again with more penalties. And the last one is punish your family conditions. Where you require in a court order that the parent do something, and if they don't, it might cause the youth to violate a probation condition. So Professor Nanda says these are the types of probation conditions that they can be harmful and pipeline youth into jail or detention. Okay, I just wanted to say one more thing on this slide. In July of 2019, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges adopted a resolution, and I just wanted to read you a little bit on it. So in the resolution, they made clear that the organization supports and is committed to juvenile probation systems that conform to the latest knowledge of adolescent development and adolescent brain science. The organization recommends that courts cease imposing conditions of probation and instead support probation departments developing with families and youth individualized case plans that set expectations and goals. So this is going to require a whole different approach, not just putting every youth on the same menu of services, but actually doing the screening and assessment, meeting with youth and their families, individualizing what they need, and making sure there's goal setting going on with them in the process. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's see. So this is a continuation of the critique. Professor Nanda is saying the current practices, and by the way, I included a list of the bad conditions from a state court system, just so you see that it's not tribes alone. All of our systems are having to take a harder look at this. And current practices have not been effective with respect to adolescent brain development. For example, the age of the youth, their experience, their degree of development impacts how they understand and process probation conditions as a part of an already stressful court proceeding. So he was saying it's evident from the current probation structures in our court systems that youth probation conditions do not adhere to what we know about adolescent development. And he's talking about how readable the conditions are, the number of conditions, the level of intrusiveness, the lack of structure to individually tailor them to the youth's needs, and the lack of youth and family engagement. And he says this is deeply problematic because it's pipelined a lot of youth And I'll say in the state systems, they have a lot of Native youth because our youth tend to live in the urban areas. They are getting pipelined into detention and later incarceration as a result of this. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the how do we know what they need question is a question about assessment instruments. Particularly, in general, there's a category of risk assessment instruments, but in juvenile healing to wellness courts, we talk about R&R assessment instruments. Those are risk, need, responsivity assessment tools. And we have a list of them at TYRC that we can provide to you. But here, this is the broader basket of assessment instruments that are used by probation officers and in state and county juvenile courts. Just to say a little bit about this, they use these tools to decide what probation conditions to give to youth. They're trying to say there's some logical connection between the condition they give a young person and rehabilitation and crime prevention. That's the thought about how it should work. However, they also hope that the use of those tools lets you know what the chances are that young person will recidivate, will do the bad act again. And they use these tools as a basis to form a basis for their recommendations to the judge about whether someone should be on probation and how long and what services they access. However, these tools can be misused. For example, if you have a non-native probation officer with a lot of native youth, it's really easy for bias and racism and other issues to come into the way the tool is used. So often the problem is not with the tool, it's with the person who administers the tool. Do they have training in how to use it? Do they have what we call fidelity to the model? Do they follow the rules of how to use the tool? Because if a misused tool can be harmful. Okay, take me to the next slide. And oh, let's jump past that one. I sort of described it already. All right, I've got about 2 more slides here and then I'll hand it back over. So let's talk about what the approach is. And sometimes there's probation officers in juvenile drug courts now. So notice that now we're not talking about juvenile courts. We're talking, that's the old way of doing things. Now we're talking about juvenile courts, which is the new way that states are doing things. And in the juvenile drug courts, probation officers and case managers are developing those individualized case management plans with services. They're tailoring the services to the assessed needs and risk levels of youth. And the research suggests, and they're using R&R tools, the research suggests that interventions should be carefully matched to the assessed needs and risk levels of participants and delivered in an appropriate sequence. For example, let's say you had someone with substance abuse in phase 1 of your juvenile healing to wellness court. You wouldn't want to give them a lot of cultural activities in phase 1 if they need to detox, right? So you have to think about how you pace out the services and activities in your phases in the right order and in the right sequence and with the right timing. And theoretically, these R&R tools help you think about that. Okay, so there's one thing I wanted to raise here that jumps out a lot with our juvenile healing to wellness courts. So I often hear people say, oh, we want a consent-based court system. We don't want any coercion in it. And then others will come back and say, but how do we get people to actually participate in our juvenile healing to wellness court? The research suggests the problem is one of your target population. Are you targeting moderate to high risk youth, or are you targeting low risk youth? Because moderate to high risk youth, for example, with a higher risk level, it is less likely that he or she will seek treatment voluntarily and remain in treatment long enough to achieve the therapeutic aims of treatment. So high-risk persons will often require enhanced structure and accountability to ensure they engage in appropriate treatment and comply with services offered. And this is why TYRC started to split out those of you who are funded under a court and those of you who are funded under a program, because we don't want to put low-risk youth into a court. But we still want to serve them, right? They may still have some risk for substance use and abuse down the road. Okay, I know this is a lot of the dry stuff. Let's go to the last slide that I have. And I'm trying not to hurry too fast, but I'm trying to hurry a little so we can get to our guest speaker. So what does OJJDP think about these screening tools for criminogenic risk, the R&R tools? OJJDP thinks that these risk assessment tools, the R&R tools, are useful. They're important tools. They help juvenile justice practitioners assess, classify, and treat youth. And the results can be applied in case planning and service delivery in these ways here. So they do minimize bias. Like, that was the whole point of the tool, is that if you follow the tool, you put the people in the juvenile healing to wellness court that will be best served by it. And you don't have staff people who are using biased or racist judgment in deciding who gets in and who doesn't. So in the state systems, they've had a problem with people of color not getting into these diversions to wellness court or drug court because they get left in the main juvenile justice system that detains them, or in the adult criminal justice system where they can end up incarcerated. And so they're very concerned in the state system about not having bias and having a tool that will force that staff person to look at factors and treat everybody equally. The tools give professionals across agencies a common language to talk to each other. They decrease the use of unnecessary intervention. This is for low-risk youth. It helps you screen out the low-risk youth so you do no harm. And fourth, they improve resource development by providing objective data for tracking the primary problems. And in the long run, they may reduce reoffending rates. I took this straight from OJJDP materials so you can see what they're thinking about these tools. Okay, now I see there's a question about strength-based assessment here. And so this is just the R&R tool, right? It's looking for both risk of reoffending, and also it's looking at what services might meet those risks. But there's other assessments and screenings that will happen that a case manager will do, including the one with strengths and culture. And I'm going to let Erin, do you want to talk about that now, or do you have it on the menu?
Well, I know in a couple weeks we're going to be having a huge webinar just all about that. So please register for that. I think we're going more into cultural case management next, is
Okay.
what we have. But yeah.
Did questions pop up in the chat that I needed to answer?
I think that was it.
Okay. I'm handing it back over to you.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go into an approach that I have championed for a long time, and it's called systems of care. But many of us in Indian country really like to refer to it as society of care, because societies have long been a part of many of our nations and our culture. And a lot of times systems haven't been very good to us. And so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And on the left, you can see this is one example, one model of a system, a society of care framework. And literally, this is a model that puts the Native youth and family in the center and the sacred circle. And all of the supports and services literally wrap around the youth and the families. So you can see it could be, if they're involved in the juvenile justice system, that could be one of the agencies or services, mental health, social services, their school, health services, substance use, etc. So that's just one model, and anybody that takes on, any of the nations that take on this particular framework or approach usually develop their own. But we're going to go ahead and push play. This is a brief video that my colleagues and I had made a couple of years ago. And this is a great introduction to system of society of care.
Tribal nations are diverse with many different structures. Many have clans, bands, townships, rancherias, pueblos, and adoptions. For many, tribal nations have societies. Societies have been an important aspect of tribal life. They are groups of people within structures that are identified by their role in the community. Societies always serve a specific purpose. There are often behaviors and expectations in which they uphold. They work together and often operate as one unit. These groups keep our tribal ways going so we can be a strong community. Historical examples show us that there were many societies and some are still active today. There are warrior societies, peacekeeping societies, hunting, healing, social, and drum keepers, story keepers, fire keepers, societies to keep balance and harmony, and more. All societies have a purpose. All societies have values and principles that guide their actions to fulfill their purpose. We are grateful to some of the Lakota tribes who have begun to revive traditional societies as a way of providing care and support for the community's healing and wellness. The non-Native world calls this a system of care. Many Native communities understand system of care as a society of care. And like traditional societies, the system of care has values and principles to guide their actions. These values and principles are not new for tribes. The concepts are rooted within our worldviews, where everyone in the community is valued and works together for the common good. Let's first take a look at how system of care is defined, and then we can talk about what this looks like in tribal communities. A system of care is a coordinated and integrated teamwork approach. It is designed to help individuals who are at risk of mental health or other challenges. It helps them and their families live healthier lives at home, school, work, in their community, and throughout life. There are 3 core values and 12 principles that ground a system of care. Family-driven and youth-guided means that the youth and families are equal partners in leading out their healing journey. This value is intended to empower the youth and family in their healing by putting their strengths and needs in the center and helping them make choices. They become a partner in determining what services and supports will be the right fit for them. After all, healing looks different for everyone. Like shoes, they may all do the same thing, but there are only a few that are the right fit. Culturally and linguistically competent is a value that says all organizations, programs, and services reflect the cultural differences and cultural strengths of the people they are working with. This means that the rules that govern the programs and the coordination of the program and services must be a meaningful and purposeful experience that reflects the youth and family's culture. For example, I am a Native youth and my grandparents are an important part of my life. They attend almost every function I am involved in. They should also be involved in any health and wellness plans I might have as well. The third value is that all programs, services, and supports are community-based. This means that services and supports should come from the community of the youth and family. It also means that the services and supports could come from trained professionals, but it could also come from cultural knowledge keepers within the community, like spiritual leaders or language speakers. Additionally, people who have lived experiences can also carry knowledge and wisdom. People like grandmas, grandpas, aunties, and uncles, people who really care about community members and provide lots of support in the community. These are called natural helpers. In our societies, everyone has a role and are part of the solutions to the challenges we must overcome. By being community-based, it obviously creates a warm environment where youth and families are more likely to thrive. Some may say a structured yet less restrictive environment. When many work together with one vision and mission, we are powerful like those traditional societies with meaning and purpose. When we coordinate and integrate services and support using these three core values, our system of care will create paths to healing and wellness for youth, families, and our community today and for generations to come.
Okay. So I'm kind of running a little behind. I really want Curtis to be able to talk here, but just this is a brief slide from Casey Family Foundations, but just really looking at the outcomes associated with societies of care. It really improves school attendance and improves family functioning, especially increased cross-system collaboration and decreased suicide rates. There's just a lot of improved outcomes, not only for the individual and the family, but for the whole community. Next slide, please. So wraparound case management. So if the framework is going to be the Society of Care, which I absolutely love because I feel it fits very well into many of our traditional societies and our cultures. I mean, I feel like if we're going to support our youth and our families, why would we not go back to our traditional blueprint? I mean, that had been the success and the way that our people had been thriving for centuries. That had been the blueprint for our healthy youth development. And if something did occur, there was restorative practices that brought everyone back together again. For healing and for wellness. And so we need to honor that, and we need to go back to our ancestral blueprint for our traditional societies for healing and health. So I really love the Society of Care. So if we have the Society of Care framework, one of the approaches within that framework could be the wraparound case management approach. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. So just like Society of Care, it has different values within it and guidelines. And just like Society of Care, literally you're putting the youth and the family and wrapping around the services supports. You're using any of the tools that you're using for assessing, for screening. They're all strength-based, they're culturally appropriate. A lot of the same values and guidelines are very similar. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. These are the wraparound guiding principles right there. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide because it goes into a little bit more detail for each one. Okay, so I'm just going to pick a couple. You can see that the first one, family voice and choice. I love that value because as you could see in the video, so many of us have extended families, and I know that in my family, like my mom, the kid's grandma, is so active in their lives. She makes decisions just like the youth in that video. And so the family voice and choice and being really active in that youth's healing and wellness plan, that's so important. And I really think that needs to be brought into the youth healing and wellness um, healing plans. Natural supports. Let the youth, who are their people? Who's their people? Could it be the youth basketball coach? Could it be the uncle who isn't blood related? Who is the youth person? Listen to them, let them bring in their natural supports. Okay, next slide, please. Community-based and culturally competent. As Native people, we are relational. We have relations not only to each other, but also to the land, to the two-leggeds, to the four-leggeds. What is the youth's relation to the land? Or have they been out in the land? Do they know to go out and identify and harvest medicine? What is their relationship to the four-leggeds? Like, can you bring in equine therapy if that's part of your culture? Next slide, please. And then again, strength-based. This is everything from the moment that you meet the youth all the way from, the healing plan, the safety plan, screening and assessment. When you are going into the court and you are reporting to the judge, what's the first thing that you're going to offer the judge about the youth? Is it going to always be, well, they didn't comply, they're in non-compliance with X, Y, and Z? Or are you going to offer the judge, even if they have some non-compliance, are you going to find a strength for that youth? They did really well with, this, with a behavior to, build up their confidence. So those are some of the principles of wraparound that, and I really champion this approach. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So this is looking at how basically case management, we had talked about before, case management really is implicit and a necessity when you're working through all the tribal 10 key components. So even though it might say case management is one of the 10 key components, really it's very important for screening and assessment. And it really depends on your case management approach. So hopefully you're seeing that through the slides. Are you going to take a case management approach where it's just you might screen for criminogenic needs and maybe substance use, and then you just kind of refer out and check in? Or are you going to do this case management holistic approach? And what are the tools, the screening assessment tools? Is it going to reflect a case management approach where you're working with the community to identify what's really important to the community and what's important to the youth and the family? Are you going to holistically screen and assess for that youth? Are you going to screen for mental health, substance use, trauma? Are you going to do a cultural assessment to help them become more connected to their culture, which we know is one of the most important protective factors for our Native youth, for both short and long-term health outcomes. So case management is just extremely important in all aspects of the 10 key components. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so it is my great pleasure to introduce one of my grantees, and he is the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court Coordinator for the Winnebago Tribe, Mr. Curtis Alexander Jr. Curtis, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to introduce myself appropriately. My name is Curtis Alexander Jr., and my Umaha name is Hilamasha. My pronouns are he, him, his. So we're going to kind of go over some stuff about Winnebago Juvenile Healing to Wellness, and how I've come to know this position. So it's not going to be too, I'm not going to get into too much detail about everything. That's my short introduction. So that's basically what I went over. I come from the Omaha Nation, or the Omaha Degiha Nation. I am in the Eagle family, the bird clan, and my Omaha name is Hida Masha. And that's my wonderful headshot. For us, we have our two elder judges that sit over every case and review and give recommendations. They also mentor and teach some of our intervention and prevention classes that we have. We have Sarah Snake. She came on about a year and a half ago. Sarah is a Winnebago tribal member. She is very involved in youth development. She's done everything from being a tribal court judge to being the high school cheerleading coach. And she is a very sweet person. I absolutely love her. She has been a person that I remember in my childhood. And growing up and being involved in working, I worked with her for several years in my adulthood. We also have Charles Hensley. He is from the Ho-Chunk Nation. He does a lot of our intervention classes that we have here. He is also like our cultural consultant on a lot of things. Charles is very knowledgeable about the Ho-Chunk Winnebago culture. So I rely on him a lot for his wisdom and information. So this is kind of my lattice, to success with our programs, how we our collaborators here in Winnebago. So usually our clients, they have their citation or they're running with the law, let's say, and they are then brought here to Winnebago YCIC, which they are brought into our intake, where they go through multiple screenings with our intake professionals. At that time, that's when I'm kind of introduced to who is being brought in and why they're being brought in. And I could make contact with family at that time. There's also points where they could be in the facility here at YCIC, our holdover facility, or they go home and then they have to go to court. And usually the court orders them to be involved in our assessment unit, which does like all of our mental health screenings, our substance use evaluations, and our cultural evals. And then it goes back to the court, the tribal court, and at that point there will be an order given if the child, our juvenile, wants to be a part of juvenile healing to wellness, or if they, want to go another route. That is completely up to them. And then with me, that's usually when I make contact, is that very same time when the order is given from the tribal court. And then we, meet several times with the family to go over different programmings or different assessments that they need to be involved in. And I am very hands-on with my clients. I try to help them to be as successful in my program as possible. And I make handoffs to our, intervention specialists, our therapists, whoever they have to meet with, very seamlessly and easily. One of our big things that we had that was a roadblock to a lot of our client success was transportation and knowing when and where to be. So a lot of times I spend several hours of my day transporting clients back and forth to different sessions, to classes. They let me know, they send me a message, parents call me, let me know what's going on with them if they're not able to make it. But I tell them I want them to be as successful with our program as possible. And I want them to know, you can reach out to any one of these people that you have classes with, you have to go to therapy with, there should be no reason why you couldn't reach out to them. And I understand that sometimes being a hands-on situation in coordinating our clients might not feel comfortable, even for the clients. So like they said, you have to kind of make it particular for that specific client. If they're better with, not, getting rides and all of that stuff, like doing it on their own, then that's totally fine. But I found success where I connect with them and then we meet them at their needs, allowing them to, then tell me if they need rides or not, if they need to miss this class, or if they need to maybe do it later on. So yes, go ahead and go on to the next slide. I think I kind of went over these already. Sorry. Our huge collaborators, these are a lot of individuals that are part of the programs that we do here. Charles, he is our cultural specialist. He is also our facilitator for our Red Road program. We have Brianna Bickerstaff. She is our AOD, that's alcohol and other drugs instructor. And she also coordinates the assessment unit. So she is one of the people that I have them make contact with. And, she is the person that they have to go to for different sessions and things like that. And then we also finding outside sources that allow for educational, cultural education. And we use Little Priest Tribal College, their community education classes. And if we aren't able to find the resources here at YCIC, we reach out to our tribal our other tribal programs who have cultural education, like our language department, our Little Priest Tribal College, our human services department. And these different programs have classes that we consider preventative, classes that will help our clients. So it's not just the things that we're doing up here, but we're also reaching out to those community partners. And then we have Donna Wolf, who is our prevention specialist, and she's a huge help. I did training all week with Donna this week, and she's on the Garrett Lee Smith grant, which is a suicide prevention grant, which is a huge thing, that education that we need here on our reservation. Go ahead. So I want to go back to kind of something Pat was talking about with making sure that we're not just, having a menu and assigning those menu items to our, clients. Our juveniles need to, and we literally have, a sheet that says X here for whatever classes our clients need. or whatever interventions our clients need. But you really have to think about, why is the client in here? What are the issues that are happening? What are other ways that, our mentorship can help with this young person? So finding other avenues like that, I was just saying, use those community partners that you have to better make a plan for your clients. That's truly one of the best things here. So this is kind of the step-by-step, approach that we have is, they come in, do the assessments. We have our random UA testing that I do on a monthly basis, depending on if the client has made comments during the assessment process. Okay. We rely on our therapeutic approach with our therapists, our mental health counselors, all of those individuals, and they all have a seat at the table. When we talk about one person, we incorporate all of these people's, opinions and what they know about this person. And then we offer these, the alcohol and other drug classes, the Generation Red Road, therapy sessions, cultural classes. And then there's also referring our clients to outside sources where they can get help that is more family structural based than just being about the client. Okay.
So before we go to the poll, we have like some time, and I'm gonna go ahead and ask people to see if they have any questions about the Winnebago Juvenile Healing to Wellness case management approach. And while people are thinking of some questions for Curtis, I'm gonna ask you one, and I'm gonna say, what do you think is one of the biggest impactful changes you had made?
It was being a lot of my clients, this is something I didn't share before, is I worked at the Winnebago Public School. So several of my clients who were, elementary age are now, high school age. And they come into the program and they kind of already know who I am and how I work, in the classroom setting and things like that. So it kind of made it easier to segue and be more like hands-on with them and communicating with their parents, communicating with their guardians. And, I felt comfortable doing that. And allowing them to, engage me as, in whatever means they need to, I think is a really big one, handing out, our emails, our phone numbers, and letting them know, like, you can contact me if any issues arise, and not being such a, like, strict person about everything, because life happens. Sometimes our clients aren't able to meet some of those recommendations that we have for them. And then we have to figure out another avenue for them, another path with them. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. Actually, that was like 3 or 4 different things.
So there are a few questions in the chat, and also I see people saying yes, no, or unsure to the poll as well. So we'll go to that in a second. But actually, for the questions, Janae says, I'm curious if Curtis would mind sharing his contact info in case our caseworkers would like to reach out.
Yes, I had other people just find my information online. I've had Erin recommend a few people to call me. I can help fill any questions that you might have. I don't want to seem like I'm like, all knowing of this, but I do have I do have some, words of wisdom for you about, where you're at. Because when I started, I did not know which way to go. And I had many questions that I would randomly ask Erin. And it takes a while to get to, where we are right now.
And Michelle says, approximately how many youth are in your juvenile healing to wellness court?
Right now I have 23 that are very active. I have two who are in one actually that's in inpatient treatment, one that is in our shelter, and I have two that are ready to graduate, so they are not as active in our our intervention and prevention classes and things like that. So I have quite a bit. I think my maximum number that I had that I was working with was like 29 clients. It was a pretty, large number. And yes.
And Curtis, I also thank you for sharing all of that information. My question is actually, I'm interested how you got all of those key players sitting at that table. Sometimes there are missing links, missing people, and
Yeah.
kind of what was the buy-in for them? How did you get them sitting there and communicating, collaborating? I know it took some time, but what were your efforts? What did that look like?
Um, it's understanding the processes, I think, for me on like our therapeutic side. And I had a lot of communication between myself and the therapist. And our assessment unit, we're all in-house. So like it's our therapists are right here, the intake specialists are right here, my prevention specialists are, right across the hall, probably listening to me talk about them right now. And then our cultural consultant, Charles, he is in-house as well. So like we have like I go down the hall, I send an email, let everybody know that we need to meet and discuss. And then we get outside entities that come in and meet with us too. And we go to like the school. So it's like if we want to do one person, that may be 3 or 4 different meetings, like depending on who it is, those, like you were saying, if meeting their support system. And if it's the basketball coach, we need to actually go and have that conversation with that individual, and do it at the school, kind of thing. Or, meet with whomever we can that it's going to help support our clients. And like I said, case management, it's not just, a 1 day, couple of hour kind of thing. It's like all week kind of conversation that we have with our clients. So yes, it gets pretty lengthy.
Thank you for sharing. And Erin, go ahead and take it away.
So I've had the great opportunity to work with this amazing team. And Lisa, I know another one of their members is on, and I'm not going to put you on the spot unless you want to unmute. But I also just wanted to say that this model has been years in the making. So it's taken a lot of grant writing, continuous grant writing, and they have just amazing people and leadership that is helping to keep everyone connected. Um, in addition to all the things that Curtis had shared. So this sort of model, which they had been part of a society of care approach to, I would say, gosh, and I don't know, Lisa, if you're able to put in the chat, but I think it's been quite a few years in the making, probably like 8 or so. So just to kind of give a little bit of background in that, but okay. Anybody else?
And just a number of people have said that they appreciate you and thank you for sharing. So In Alaska, I learned Koyana, which was more than thank you, but gratitude. So Koyana Curtis. And thank you, Erin, for dropping his email in the chat so people could reach out, but also being mindful that there's, grace for yourself. And this is a, work in progress and it takes time and 8 years in the making. And so for those who are on the line wanting to get to this caliber, just have a lot of grace for yourself and work with your TA, and we'll pull Curtis in and ask for help too. And so we're all doing hard work here. And Lisa says, yes, 8 years.
Yep.
And now I guess we could get to the polling question, which we're asking after this presentation, do you see your role in supporting case management in the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court or program changing? Yes, no, or I am unsure. And a number of people earlier had said yes, yes to the poll. And yes. So you do see your role in supporting case management in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court or program changing? Yes. And actually, I'm interested. How do you see it changing? And a few saying I'm unsure. So grace for yourself, letting it be a work in progress. So how will you be supporting them or supporting case management? What some things will you consider? I had also dropped in the link to the video. Every time I watch it, I learn something new of who might also need to be there. And so in support as your TA, considering some of those missing links, people, and also, Erin, as you said, just a connection to the world around you. So what might be missing? Okay, and next slide, I believe. All right, Erin, go ahead and talk about the resources, and then I will wrap us up.
Okay, so the first one is a link to the fact sheet for systems of care in Indian country. It has been developed as just a background on the term, just some other really great points to look at and learn a little bit more. The second one is a high fidelity wraparound in tribal communities fact sheet from NICLA, which is another great resource. And then on the right is just a snapshot of an introduction to culturally based wraparound services. Now, this is from our partners at the National Native Children's Trauma Center at the University of Montana. This is a training that is available to you if you are thinking about going down the route of having the wraparound service as your case management model. I've been at this training several times with a couple different tribes, and I really highly recommend it. Alan Rabadou is a great trainer. He is so engaging and funny, and he just really gets it. So I highly recommend that training. And I want to thank Curtis again so much. So grateful for you. And go to the next slide.
We'd also like to continue today's discussion in the grantee portal forum. And so if you are a current grantee, you could actually log in. If you don't have a login yet, just reach out to us at tribalyouth@tlpi.org. Public and national online learning events will also be published on our homepage, Tribal Youth Resource Center, where you'll find all the OLAs, and YouTube. And so then what is the grantee portal? It's just a place where we can continue to connect and have these conversations. I want to recognize the chat here. And Janae said, our program started during COVID, so it had many changes already. We are always looking for ways to better it. I don't think anything is ever perfect. There's always room for growth and change. And yes, progress, not perfection. And Joni said, yes, making sure it will be specific to that youth, identifying specific tools to use regarding their needs. And Michelle says, question, I took pictures of the slides. However, will the PowerPoint be available to us? Yes. So when we resend this back out, and our tech team and Antonia and others, you could actually get the PowerPoint slide and the record. So you could go back to it and click on the links and the resources and also hear our voices. So this will be a tool and a resource for you. And next slide, please. All right. Time and space for additional questions or discussion. Did anyone want to unmute and ask any other questions for Curtis or Erin, or perhaps Judge Pat?
I would just say that I was thinking about the strengths needs recovery tool that's part of the wraparound approach. And I know we were talking about R&R, but we're really thinking that you're using both of these tools in different parts of what you're doing. And we're going to have a screening and assessment OLE coming up. Ashley, do we know off the top of our heads what that date is?
For screening and assessments, it is going to be June 27th.
Okay, so please look out for that announcement. There's a lot of debate about these topics still, and we want to hear from you all about your experiences on this question. It helps us all figure out, what the pros and cons are. So thank you so much for coming today.
And agreed, lots of debate and lots of tools and getting them to work for your program and court. So stay tuned. We'll have that link coming soon. And if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and close this out today. So before we close completely, we would like you to take an evaluation. It provides overall opinion for content improvement, tells us how we did as presenters, and it's always anonymous. So we're always looking to improve. So go ahead and take the evaluation if you can. And at any time, if you ever have any questions, you can visit our website at tribalyouth.org, where you're going to be able to find our online learning events, resources, and tools. It's also where you log into the portal. And you can also connect with us. Here are our phone numbers here or at tribalyouth.org, like I said. And please work with your TA. Again, it's progress, not perfection, and of holding space with you and brainstorming better ways to do things. And if we don't know it, we will pull in our team of experts. Serving youth is so hard, and creating a system, a society of care to make it work for your program and community is a lot of work. So I praise the work that you're doing, and we're here with you walking in this journey. So again, thank you, Koyana. And I'd like to close this in a good way. I'd like for you to just close your eyes and reflect on maybe some things that might need a change. And envision kind of just what's the essence of case management. Maybe even the title might need a change. Who needs to be involved? What do they do? So just visualizing and closing your eyes and reflecting on change to come. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it might take 8 years. And take a good breath. We're so glad you're here. And thank you for joining us.